The word avatar need not necessarily be used for spiritual people. It could be used for anybody who has got some specific work to do on the planet. Like we have a man called Ramanujan, who's called a mathematics avatar. Now, this gentleman, whenever a question was posed to him, he would pass on the question to what we call the Antaryamin or the Indweller, and the answer would come from there. And he lived for a very short time, and he gave a lot of breakthroughs in mathematics. So similarly, if you give some breakthroughs in music, we would call you a music avatar. And the same thing can happen to science or to dance or anything. So anybody with a specific purpose who's come down for a specific purpose, we call him an avatar. So when I began this work, people began to say he's putting us into altered states of consciousness, and he is an avatar who has come for that. So it was the people who called me an avatar. For me, this thing has continued from childhood. So my mother, who's from a village, she was a very innocent woman, and in the Indian tradition, they believe that it's possible to invite God to come in as your child. So she was 13 years old when she got married. So she used to go to a temple and worship there, saying, "You must be born to me as my child." And she got this Antaryamin, or the Indweller of Lord Krishna. And he came as a baby into her, and she was feeling that he's the one who's going to be born to her. And when she gave birth, the Antaryamin disappeared for her, and she thought, now that the child is born, the Antaryamin has disappeared. So that was her feelings while I was in the womb. And maybe that influenced me, I do not know. But from the days I could remember, I could feel that people around were not experiencing what I was experiencing. So I was wondering, how am I to give it to them? Then I realized it has to be actually transferred to them. So this work began ever since I was a child, but I could really do it only sometime around 1989. I was watching the way they were behaving and they were responding. So I was wondering, why is it they are behaving like this? And now I have this ability to experience what other people are experiencing. So I decided to experience what they're experiencing. Then I found that they're experiencing the world very differently from the way I was experiencing. So it was then that I decided, no, I have to make them experience the way I am experiencing. And thus began this work. When I experience the world, when I listen to some sound, I find that I'm not interpreting it. When I look at something, again, there's no interpretation going on. And there's nobody who's hearing or nobody who's seeing. There's nobody there. There's just the experience of the seeing, the hearing, the thinking. Well, I found in the case of the others, they had this feeling that somebody was there doing these things. So then I decided, no, something has to be done here. Exactly experience the way I was experiencing. Because when I was experiencing, I was getting joy. While I found they were getting no joy at all. So I decided that the idea of somebody being there has to go. That was how it all began. Oh, that never happened to me. That was why I often had to experience others to know how it was that they were relating to the world. No? So I never went through any process of enlightenment because it was there all the time from the beginning. It was only a question of my trying to understand what others were experiencing. It was the other way around. My father was an atheist. and he was a no-nonsense person. And I was most of the time alone by myself. So he was a little disturbed about it. And he used to ask me, what do you propose to do with your life? I said, I'm going to transform the world.
Even from young age you knew this?
Yes.
From what age, Bhagavan, did he know?
That could have been probably 6 or 7.
Ah.
So my father used to ask me, what do you think you are? I used to tell him, I'm God. And that put real fear into him. So the family got together and they were thinking whether they should show me to a psychiatrist. Maybe I was suffering from a messiah complex or some such thing. But then they found that I was quite ordinary otherwise. There was no trouble being caused. I was good at academics, was doing my work, and was causing no trouble to others. And some friends advised, don't take him to a psychiatrist, that could lead to other kinds of problems. So he put up with this for many, many years. So this was going on and on. So I was 10, I was 13, I was 15, I was 18. The same story was being repeated. He used to ask me, what do you propose to do? And the same answer would come out. And who do you think you are? I am God. No? So this is really too much. So then he thought maybe marriage could be the best solution to this. So he said, you have to get married. I said, that's fine. And the marriage happened and the same thing continued. And
this was much later when you were 28, wasn't it? Marriage
yes,
happened,
married. And the same story that I am God. And worse till now, my wife was saying that she was God's wife. So he couldn't take in all this with his strong atheistic background. So finally he told me one day, well, if it's all true, convince me that you are God, give me the experiences. I said I would do that. I gave him a lot of experiences. He was very convinced and I was so happy. He said, I don't think I need to live any longer. And then a few months later he passed away. Out of sheer happiness.
Out of sheer happiness?
Yes.
He died of happiness?
Yes. I did my graduation in mathematics, and most of my education was in Christian institutions. To be more specific, it was at Don Bosco School in Chennai. So that was where I was mostly educated by Jesuit priests.
I see.
So I have a very good understanding of Christianity. Actually, I could not pay attention in school because this activity was going on inside me. Like the chanting of certain mantras and certain other things were going on. But somehow when the exams came, I could handle the exams. And I used to do fairly well in the exams. I really did not know what is the purpose of this because there was no intent behind my doing this. As I told you earlier, I was made to do these things. We could postulate something like a higher energy or a higher power, which made me do these things. What for, I had no idea at that time. Now, the mantra I was chanting, I had no idea because it was not conforming to the Sanskrit words, There's something wrong about it. But still, I was only made to chant those words. So I was made to go through all this for what I never knew at that time, till the phenomenon broke loose.
And once the phenomenon broke loose, did you then understand what these were?
Then I could understand all that had earlier happened. In fact, it helped me a lot.
I see.
I understand that they were preparing for this Diksha, for the transmission of these energies. That was the preparation.
I see.
But without my knowledge.
I see. I see.
At that point of time, it appeared to me as though that was something other than me. But now, to me, it looks as though that also is me.
Yes, I see.
Yes. When I used to go to temples, I used to sometimes feel that I was inside the idol and watching out. So then I had this feeling that I must be God because I seem to be inside the idol and not outside. And yet, being a small boy, there were times when I wanted to play out, go and mix with other children. The desires used to come, but I found that I was being held back. I was not being allowed to play. I was being made to do these things. So I began to attribute it to a higher power, which was overpowering me. Because I wanted to play but could not. So this thing would stop me and say, no, sit here like this and do that. So I was thinking of that as a higher power. But as the years rolled by and the phenomenon took its birth, I could see it was part of me doing that. It became one. Well, it so happened that there came a point of time when my parents decided I must get married. And since I always believed in making parents happy, I said, okay, go ahead. In India, we have this tradition of parents selecting the bride or the bridegroom, making them meet and talk. So it so happened that some family friends made us meet. And the moment I saw her, I knew that she was to be my soulmate, and she also felt the same way. And she had all the years been praying that she must marry God. So somehow she felt that this was the man she should marry. And there was no second thought. And then we got married. In Amma's case also, the obsession was just wanting to get married to God. Because this kind of thing does exist in India. And that being the case, she was very different from other women. So in a sense, we can say she also was in a different state of consciousness, not the normal state of consciousness. Because her only obsession was with God. She used to get up very early in the mornings, go to the river banks, do prayers, do the rituals. She was doing nothing else but that. Well, children of her age were trying to become doctors and engineers. She wasn't doing all that. She was only focused on getting married to God and her rituals and prayers. It has now become a sort of tradition in that village now to do some rituals which she performed in order to get a good husband. No, when I got married, I was working with a public sector organization. And after I got married, I resigned the job and started the school. I was waiting for her to come into my life to start the school. I and a friend of mine, we were very dissatisfied with the education system. So we wanted to try out a new kind of school which would help children discover what their true nature was. It was a residential school, and the whole idea was to help children become enlightened. So that was the motive in starting the school. And it so happened that some people did become enlightened. And some children became enlightened, some parents became enlightened. That is how the whole phenomenon began. So finally, when the Dikshas were being given, they would take any form. Some had Rama as their Antaryamin, Krishna, some had Christ, some had some formless state. So various things were emerging out of the Diksha. And a lot of strange phenomena broke loose in the campus. Like you could get all kinds of sacred smells all over the campus. You could hear sacred chanting going on, people moving into states. And this kind of thing was happening. And people passing on the road would move into states. So at that time, somehow I felt things were going out of control. And took a strong sankalpa. Sankalpa means an intent that it will be good if the phenomenon is withdrawn for some time. And then it slightly withdrew. Antaryamin means the Indweller who resides in your heart or in any of your chakras and to whom you could speak to. And he responds to that. You can ask him for for help, he would help you out. You could pray to him, you could worship him, you could do whatever you want. He's more like a friend there helping you out. So that's how the phenomenon broke out. People would go into states of great joy for no reason, and people would discover tremendous love for one another, for the animals, for the plants, which was not taught to people. The school was not teaching these things, but children would move into these states. We found children talking to animals, talking to trees, and getting along very well. Children healing children, and one day we found one boy, he made about 30 children stand in a queue and healed them all. He was no healer, he was a Muslim boy. He just said, line up, now I'll heal you. And he healed them all. So all this kind of thing was, things were happening. But I was the director of the school. I was looking into the spiritual side of the school.
I see.
On a day-by-day basis, I used to conduct classes on meditation, on spirituality, on philosophy. So I used to take such classes. So children were exposed to a very high level of understanding of the philosophy, of science, much beyond their age. And there were occasions when I also taught mathematics and history. That also used to be done. Yes. For example, we were not giving ranks in the school. Children were not ranked. And there was no question of detaining a child in any particular standard. Everybody automatically passed. And if the child refused to study, he would not be compelled to study. And basically what we were emphasizing was relationship among children and between the children and their parents. What we are now doing in the courses was what we were doing then. But strangely, the children also did academically very well. Today, most of them are doctors, engineers. They hold very important positions in the corporate sector. They did not end up as failures in the world either. So they are not only in a very good state of consciousness, but they're also worldly very successful.
So, but you were not putting any pressure on them to become
No
successful?
academic pressure was put on the child. It was never done. And the children were not scolded, and they were never beaten. And if any teacher was found being very harsh with the child, the teacher was removed from the school. Yes, but then we could prove that it is not really true. But then you also had to be a teacher with enormous love. Otherwise, probably it cannot be done. Merely giving a child freedom may not fully work. He needs to have a teacher around who is completely comfortable with himself. The teacher himself must be experiencing inner freedom and inner joy, and he must relate to the child in a very different way. Then it's possible, not otherwise. Yes, we had the buildings. Probably a year before the school started, I expressed the intent that on this date the school would start. But there was no land, there was no money, there's nothing in fact. We just approached one gentleman and told him, would you give us some land on lease? So he said, yes, you could take this land. And then we went and met some people and said, would like to start a school like this? Some said, okay, we'll help you a little bit. So we began with just one main building. And then in a matter of 3-4 years, the school grew sufficiently big. But it exactly commenced on that date with buildings, with money, and with students. There were a lot of other boards. One board read, this place exists for the enlightenment of man. There was another board which said, man is mad. So there are a lot, your thoughts are not your thoughts, self is a concept. Such boards were there. But since we left the place because of the weather and the lack of maintenance, many of the boards collapsed. Basically, we are trying to educate the parents that the current educational system was destroying their children, and that the school must help the child discover what he or she really was. And basically, the whole focus was on making the child enlightened. We are trying to rid the child of the self and free him from all self-centered activity. That was the whole sankalpa, or the intention of the school. And finally, that was achieved. That was not from the very beginning, but somewhere in the middle, the statue was placed there because a painter had come and very spontaneously made a statue of the Buddha. And we thought, since he symbolizes enlightenment, why not we keep him in the park?
Maximum size of the
It
school?
went up to a maximum of 179
Yes.
residential students,
Yes.
and about 200 day students.
That's a big operation.
Yes. But once this phenomenon broke out, the school became so famous that it nearly became impossible to run the school anymore. And we had to focus on our spiritual work. So we shut down the school. And now we help other schools do this kind of work. What happened, the school closed down as an academic institution, and it became an ashram for spiritual work, and the dasas emerged. The Indian tradition, anyone dedicating himself for spiritual work is very often called a dasa. So some children decided to stay back. They didn't go back home. They wanted to stay on with the school. So these children were called the acharyas. And complete freedom was given to them to go around to spread the work and to recruit people for the work. These became models, and seeing them, people were inspired to become like them. They came and joined the movement. And these acharyas trained those people and called them the dasas. So ever since, it has been an independent body of people. They make the rules, they manage their affairs, and they do everything about themselves by themselves. I and Amma, we have nothing to do with it. Yes, after the school was closed and the order was established, we went away to live in the city.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
You were not living in Jivashram?
No.
I see.
We went away to lead our own quiet life. And occasionally these people would come and meet us.
I see.
And we would give them some advice and suggestions, that was all. Well, I used to go for walks on the beach and spend time talking with Amma or with Krishna, that was all. And these people would go out and do the work.
I see.
So once in a month or so, I think they used to come and they used to give me a report as to how things are going. I was just leading my own quiet life.
I see. And then
I was not meeting the public or anybody.
I see.
I preferred to go for my evening walks,
Yes.
spend time by the beach,
Yes.
and I had a good time. I always felt that there was no need for me to come into public life. That I could, because I'm a married person, and I thought I could quietly live my life, and that the dasas could do all this work. So there was no need for me to really meet the public and talk to them. But because of certain political situations, I had to actually come out and meet the public. The situation was because I was not meeting people, I became some kind of a mystery. And all kinds of rumors were floating, and the government felt extremely uncomfortable. So the government said, if you continue to remain a mystery, there will be a lot of problems. So come out into the open, you know. So I had to come out into the open. The kind of courses that we now do here, they were being held there at that time. So there were, I think, 3-day courses, 6-day, 10-day courses, all kinds of courses were going on, which these people used to conduct.
And this was only Indian people, or also there were Western?
There were also Westerners.
Yes.
There were Indians and Westerners, both used to come there. Most of the work has been done by these acharyas and dasas. While I did not meet the dasas for the first 5 years, these acharyas used to come home and meet me, and they would discuss their problems, and they would seek guidance from me, and I would provide that. So my stand was that I would supply the spiritual power, and they would be the ones who would be applying it outside. So we used to discuss those matters. So the actual work was done by the acharyas initially, and then they were joined by the dasas.
Shri Bhagavati Rava Rava Amma Neevu Darshanamiyava.
We exhibit different kinds of powers. If somebody comes to me with a problem, my attitude would be, now I caught him now. So I'll do all my best to make him enlightened. And Amma's approach is more like that of a mother. Her argument with me is, don't waste your time trying to give me enlightenment. Let's help him out first. The poor man is struggling. This is not the time for you to talk about enlightenment. So we do have such differences. So in fact, what happened that many years ago, Amma's picture got into the hands of a few people, and miracles were happening. And these people did not even know that she was married. So they were worshipping her in certain parts of northern India. And then when somebody told them that she was married, they became furious. They said, how is it possible? And then finally they had to be told, yes, there is a person called Bhagavan who's her husband. So she was functioning independently. And so the whole thing is hers is more a mother's love, you know. But when both of us combine, it's very, very effective. There is a quarrel, yes.
This must be very good. Can we film this, Bhagavan?
Yes. Somebody could be having a financial problem. So I would say let it be in that condition for the next 6 months. Might be he'll come to his senses, we could make him enlightened. Amma would say that's too much. So while we would be arguing, Amma might suddenly bless him, and the person escapes.
I see. So now, she usually wins the argument.
Yes. So in that case, I just go along with her.
Okay.
And sometimes I act faster than her, and she goes along with me. But there are real differences.
Yes. So who wins most of the time?
Most of the time, it's Amma who's winning. Because Amma is generally quicker, you know.
I see. It's the same in my house too.
I see. For me, there's no difference at all.
Really?
It's the same thing. But for Krishna, it is not so. So he would often demand, you have to be a father to me.
And how is it for you to be a father?
Well, I do sometimes respond, at least I put on an act.
I see.
And he knows that I'm putting on an act.
So what sort of act do you put on?
Well, I would make some inquiries like a father would do.
Oh, I see.
And then he feels satisfied.
Ask him how he's doing
Yes.
and everything.
He's
like
got
that.
used to it now, of course. We don't have a personal life. Like we do not discuss personal matters like a normal couple does, you know. Ours is only public life, you know. We only think about the devotees, the movement, the dasas, and what should we do. It's only that kind of talk. There's nothing personal because there's no personal life. There's no person there inside to have a personal dialogue. It's absent.
So you don't just have an evening where you watch TV and eat
No,
popcorn
not
like,
at all.
like we do.
Yes, in fact, Amma never watches TV except very rarely.
Yes, yes.
I at least watch news to see what's going on in the world. Very violent scenes or warlike scenes are shown. That's a bit difficult to watch because very often it's possible to experience the pain of the person being shown on TV. So generally I would then say, please switch off the TV. It's becoming too much.
Yes. So you feel the pain of the other people like it,
Yes.
as though it's your own pain.
Yes, it affects you.
Yes, yes,
It affects the body itself.
yes,
So in such cases, it has to be switched off.
yes, yes.
At the higher levels of consciousness, you cannot say the other and yourself, the dividing line vanishes.
Yeah.
And suppose you kick a dog out there, you could feel the pain in your stomach here.
Yes.
It becomes like that.
Yes, yes.
So that's what happens to the dasas also.